Hello, Culture Matters podcast. I am so excited to introduce you to our guest. Before I do that, here's a quote just for this episode. Fear doesn't control us by dominating. It controls us by quietly convincing us that our comfort is more important than happiness. The only real risk is taking no risks. The only real failure is having no failures. The only real pain is the avoidance of pain. Mark Manson. Our guest today is a thought leader or a leader in thought, if I understand correctly, at least a six-time published author. I've actually invested in one of the books. To my knowledge at the time, I knew there was at least one, and I read that book. That was Leadership in the Age of Personalization. A mutual friend originally told me about this person. I've read that book. I got so much value from it. For almost 2 decades now, at least, they've been advising Fortune 500 companies on all levels as an advisor in strategy, business, consulting, and inclusion of thought, it seems, and how to actually make diversity happen. The new book we're going to talk about today is Make Reinvention Your Superpower. So I can't wait to oh yeah, the name Glenn Llopis is here. God, I hope my North Jersey accent said that right. I'm a little nervous. Thanks for coming on the show, my friend. Thanks for
Jay,
everything you
man.
do.
No. Thank you, Jay. I love your energy. Let's create some positive vibes for people and let's just make sure that when people walk away from this show, they continue to see the value you help create for them.
Well, thank you. I would like to know, was it a mentor, an experience, or a combination of the two, or something else that led to this idea of learning, unlearning, relearning? Because there's something really deep there.
Yeah, very good question. Well, let me step back and maybe give you a little bit of the story. So I'm a naturally high curiosity guy. I was raised by two Cuban immigrants who lost their country to Castro's revolution back in the late 50s, 59. And I share this because I was raised by parents. My dad was 50 years old when I was born, and he taught me that our job is to know our truth. And what does that mean? Well, it means that you really need to know yourself well enough to know how much value you actually add to society. And once you figure that out, you know exactly where you can give your best to everyone every single day. Unfortunately, Jay, most people don't experience that journey. Why? Well, because something happens when we start going to school. We go to school. Some people like to get their advanced degrees or their college degrees. Some don't. It's whatever people can or can't do. But what's the point? Along this journey, either those institutions start defining us or society begins to define us until one day, and that could be early in life or even latter stage in life, you wake up and you say to yourself, who the heck am I? And you realize that you don't even know who you are. In fact, Jay, I'll go so far as to tell you that I don't think most people know anybody anymore. Why? Because we place a value, and my dad told me this when I was a kid. Truth is, I didn't understand it when he told me. It took me until I was in my 20s to finally understand it. That we place more value on what people have than who they are. What happens over time is that your thoughts become manipulated by other people's truths. We start reading so many books to inspire our thoughts that we forget our own. In fact, we place greater value on other people's thoughts than our own, to the point where we sound like everybody but ourselves.
Huh.
So, where am I going with this? Is that we've reached a point now where people have become so, as I call it, and you read about it in Leadership in the Age of Personalization, Jay, we become so hyper standardized to be what other people want us to be rather than what we seek to be ourselves. So, how's this come to the question around learn, unlearn, relearn? Well, we've reached a critical point in society where the only one that's going to solve our problems is us, meaning each and every one of us has to figure out the value that they add to other people. In fact, let me try to lighten the mood and give you a little story of what I mean by this. So I'll never forget. I'm now happily married. I married up big time. I've got a 9-year-old daughter. But about 10 years before I got married, never forget that my dad came up to me. He said, "Son," I was dating this lady at the time. He said, "How much value does she add to your life?" I go, "Gee, Dad, I never really thought about that." I go, "Why do you ask?" He said, "Son, look, I really like her, but it seems to me like you're the one adding all the value." So, Jay, I hope that's actually made you think about this really simple yet powerful question. And if we ask ourselves about our own networks, the people that we surround ourselves by, and we ask that question, gee, does this person add value to my life? Does this person? And by the way, I'm sure at some moment in time they did. But I'm not talking about the past, I'm talking about the present. And you'll see that unfortunately, most people aren't. Why? It's not that they're not capable of it, is that they haven't evolved. And when you don't evolve, you're not learning,
Mm.
unlearning, and relearning. Get it? In other words, Jay, they didn't take the time to recognize that they themselves didn't know how to reinvent themselves because they were often forced to reinvent themselves based on what other people thought they had to do. How is that?
In a sense, below their awareness, adapting to something outside of themselves and like losing themselves in that process.
Bingo. And you just eloquently described the major identity crisis that we have, not just in our workplaces, but in society. And why does that identity crisis exist? Because all we're looking for is a few things. And I'm sure people could add to the list. Number one, people want to be seen. People want to be known. People want to be respected. But respect is not given, it's earned.
Mm.
In fact, my first book, don't mean to go on a tangent, but they're all these books I've written through the years are all interconnected. It was called Earning Serendipity because I believe that, and I know people can make an argument, but I'm going to stick to my guns. I don't believe in luck. I think that you earn luck. You earn good fortune, I should say. And so why do I believe this? Because it's much like they say, what you put out there comes back to you. But it's not so simple because what I really mean is, what do we do every day to manage opportunities, not just for our own benefit, but for others? Do you think
In
we
the, or
do
I'm sorry.
we no, do you think we think about that enough when we wake up every day? What opportunities am I going to create, not just for myself,
Uh,
but for others? In fact, my belief is that we're here to create opportunities for others. Because when we do that, it creates opportunities for us. But go ahead, Jay.
well, in that respect, what have you seen that correlates with those that are conscious leaders or those that like, if there's a dichotomy of leadership at these larger organizations that you're uh involved with, would you say that moves towards those types of leaders that are more conscious?
The answer is yes. But the reality is, and this is no disrespect. Before I say it, let me say it indirectly. I shared earlier how, we start going to school and all of a sudden institutions or our workplaces begin to define us.
Mm.
Society begins to define us. And this doesn't happen to all people, but it happens to the great majority of people. And if you said, Glenn, how do you know that to be true? Well, why are we so divided? We're divided because we don't know enough of our truth that we have to fall into somebody else's until we create all these silos. We create divisiveness because we don't have enough people that know how to make their own decisions. Why? Because they don't want to feel alone. They want to feel like they're part of something. And I'm not saying feeling part of something is bad. I think it's great. But does that really align with your beliefs, what you stand for, and your values? That's the key, right? And that's really the test. But my point is, we grow up learning how to use everybody else's playbook except our own. And this is why I called one of my books that you've read, Leadership in the Age of Personalization. The subtitle is um, around how we're living in a world where we're encountering the standardization of me. It's everything about me, me, me. And the point is, it's about knowing everybody, knowing what you could expect from them. In other words, if I said to you, Jay, how do people perceive you? And do you think their perceptions of you align what they would expect from you? You don't have to answer that question, but I'm throwing it out there because we often make assumptions around how people perceive us
Uh,
rather than really ask them the question, how do you perceive me? And then how does that shape or influence what you expect from me? But why am I going there? Because when we have learned how to practice in everybody else's playbook except our own, it's another data point to say, well, we just don't know ourselves enough to know what playbook I'm capable of actually practicing that has any real value. Because I'm
mm,
always told that everybody else's playbook will generate the results that I need. But is that playbook in alignment with the capacities and capabilities that you have that actually drive that value that you want to be respected for? But if you're not following your playbook, you're following someone else's, then what happens? You lose your identity because now you're playing to everybody else's identity of what they think you should be. And I share all this, Jay, for what? Because you asked me the question about learn, unlearn, relearn. I was facilitating one of my summits last year, and I kid you not, I'll never forget this for the rest of my life. It was summit number 5, the live ones we do. And around 1:45, I said, we are in trouble because I've realized that we can talk all day long, talk, talk, talk about the same things over and over and over again. And all that really tells us is what we should know and why we should know it. But when those conversations don't talk about how we should do it, these conversations are meaningless. And I don't
huh.
say that in a mean way, but there's only so many times you can say the same things over and over and over without a how, and it becomes demoralizing. And here I was directing, facilitating, all these moving parts, full house. And I said to myself, we're in trouble. And it was at that point, Jay, to go back to your original question, that I realized we all need to reinvent ourselves. And I know that reinvention is not a novel concept, but what is this book grounded on? It's grounded on the understanding that it doesn't matter how smart you think you are, how much influence you have, what kind of job you have or title you have, all of that can go away in an instance. At least that's how it feels. And why does that happen? Because when you're trained and rewarded to practice the old ideas when we need new ones, you come to realize that it's really our responsibility. It's not the institution. It's our
Mm,
responsibility to keep ourselves relevant. Stop blaming your employer. Yeah, they have some partial responsibility, but on the end, it's you. We can't wait for people to help us grow and evolve. Why? Because what did I say at the beginning? If they don't know us, then how do they know how to do that? It's our responsibility. But what makes it so difficult? We
mm,
don't know ourselves enough to reinvent ourselves. And for those that know they need to reinvent, they don't know where to start. And I call this, Jay, career quicksand. That we all know at some level, and I deal with thousands of people, thousands of people, they're stuck. And we've known that, but they're trying to get out from being stuck, but the quicksand pulls them in. Why? Because when you get frustrated, you want to leave. And then someone says something to make you feel like it's going to be okay, you get pulled back in. Until you do this so many times, you say, I don't even know where to begin my reinvention process so I can revive my future.
In the chapter I read, eh, can you elaborate on this to make sure I follow clearly? Let's say I learn, I'm in the process of unlearning, and then you mentioned integrating my current group, the people in my life, integrating with the people in my life. Am I following that correctly?
Yeah,
I'm
no, no,
I'm
no,
meeting the
no.
people in my life where they're at in relationship to where I rise to. Can you elaborate on that?
Boy,
Got stuck in.
thank you so much for paying attention to that because that's
That's
heavy.
really important to me.
That's heavy stuff.
Yeah, I want to know what you mean by that.
Sure, sure.
Yeah,
So if I can take you through the journey of how to make because I'm a how guy.
yeah,
We
yeah.
all
This
know
whole
the
book
what.
is how,
This
right?
book is
Yeah,
all about the how.
yeah,
And I did it with this
yeah.
understanding from my other books that because we live in this age of personalization where it's no longer about the institution defining the individual, but the other way around, where the individual is now defining the process towards a shared mission. We all have to be in this together. To make it really simple, those who were taught a certain way and those that are learning new ways, they have to find a way to start bridging things together. They can't keep pulling things apart. There's too much extremism because all of this, as you mentioned earlier, this diversity of thought is becoming a threat to people. Why? Let me make it again. Let's start simplifying these things because they can sound too big if we're not careful. Look, when I started my career, they said, Glenn, do these 10 things. They'll produce these 20 outcomes. And by the way, Glenn, those 10 things, you do them my way. I did them that way until one day I started asking so many questions that I was told that I was too passionate. And then my dad said, they don't know you well enough, Glenn. Double down on your passion and they'll never, and get the numbers and they'll never ask you or question your passion again. But what's the
Wow.
point? Most of us just follow those 10 things their way, back to the playbook. But why am I going back there? Because I realized that when we get stuck in that rut, um, we start creating the illusion of our own personal success at the expense of real evolution. Why am I going there? Because what I've learned about self-directed reinvention, number one, it never ends, but you can't go at it alone. And this is that connection you were just talking about. But before you even can start considering who can help you get to where you want to go. The first thing you need to do, and these first three skills, as I call them, are about expanding yourself. So, number one, it's discover. Harness your natural curiosity to discover something new. That's where it starts. What are the ingredients to get there? And I always say that, look, these are just ingredients. Maybe these five ingredients I'm going to share, four of them you're already doing, and it's one that's holding you back, that's minimizing the four that you know. So I'm not trying to put people in boxes or say this is what you have to do. I'm just giving people options because I actually believe that everything I'm going to share with you, people are doing it, but they don't know they're doing it. And this goes back to you really have to look inward if you're going to lead or be a strong individual contributor, because with so much uncertainty in the world, or at least that's what people feel, they don't think it's easy to navigate that uncertainty because they don't know themselves well enough to navigate it. I actually believe that we're living in the most opportunistic time in modern history. And for those that reinvent themselves by knowing who they are, sky's the limit So, number one, harness your natural curiosity to discover something new. What's this mean? You need to look around. You need to look around with intentionality. Really pay attention. What's going on around you? The other ingredient is expect to find something. Be optimistic. Don't put that shadow of a doubt. Just expect to find something, but you need to, number three, be open about what form that something might take. In other words, you may not find what you're looking for, but you need to be creative enough and open minded enough to know that what you're looking for may come in another form. And that's why you need to see what you need to use this as a starting point to look for more places to look. It's very important. In other words, we're so comfortable going to the places that we know.
Mm,
That's why I always say, what do you want to do in your life if you really want to reinvent? Do you want to disrupt your comfort zone, or do you want to be forced to become accepting of discomfort? And I know what the answer is for most people. I want to do the first thing, but I'm always finding myself doing the last thing. Well, of course, because you don't know where to start. So use what you see as a starting point and look for more places to look, because the goal here is to seek solutions with intentionality. Okay. Sounds easy, takes work. Why? Because this is the beginning of a journey where you're really starting to reclaim your identity.
mm.
The identity that you lost years ago because of what we discussed before. Can I go to number two, Jay, or
Yeah,
do you
yeah,
want to
please.
jump
Yeah.
in? So, number
Yeah.
two is we need to know. In other words, we need to ground ourselves with an open, always learning mindset. I understand that we get so frustrated thinking, uh, frustrated because everyone's always talking about the same things. And I've always asked this question: who do you let into your life? Do you let those in that think like you, or those with contrary voices? I have such an interesting network, and I blew up the one I had because I
Mm,
myself fell into the trap of thinking, oh, if I associate myself with all these influential people, what does that even mean? I mean, just because they have influence doesn't mean they offer value. And
mm,
I come to learn that maybe they have influence because they're bringing along people that actually are looking for the how, but they keep getting the what. And they're confused because the what feels good, but it's not giving them what they want, but they need that energy to move forward. I'm not saying that's bad, but we need to be very careful about who we connect ourselves with. And I've made the effort to be around people that challenge me, that don't agree with me, that give me contrary points of view. You're going to say, Glenn, how can you coexist with a relationship like that? I made the decision, 3 years ago to be a great student.
mm,
I know I'm a good leader, and I'm not even going to talk about that. I want to be a better student because if I could be a better student, I could be even a more effective leader. So, what did I do when I recognized the importance of grounding yourself in an always learning mindset? Number one, I had to face my realities, I had to face my truths.
ah,
Glenn, you're not that good with this. Glenn, you need to pivot this way. Glenn, I needed to be real with me about my own truths. Now, fortunately, the foundation that my father gave me as a kid
mm,
wasn't didn't mean that I was looking for more confidence. I just knew that I have to be aware of where things don't land properly and how I can continue to be better, which means you got to have people around you to give that feedback, right? Two is with that, I needed to learn how to balance and direct my emotions, Jay. I needed to find a way to practice more self regulation. Why is this important? Like I said, you're frustrated, you're tired, you're this, you're that. If you keep thinking that way and don't regulate your emotions are going to define your path. And that can't happen. You've got to be balanced. You have to be ready to learn. So maybe this skill is too much for someone. And I understand that. But we can't avoid it because we live in a world now that's constantly changing. And we need to know what information to pay attention to based upon who you are. And that's what you'll find when you discover more of who you are so that you can start directing this always learning, open learning mindset based upon what you need to learn to become a better you. This then gives you that clarity of thought. And then you can become more poised. And part of this knowing is always maintaining a grounded understanding of reality, Jay. I mean, I'd ask people this question. How many different situations do you find yourself in on a daily basis, a weekly basis? If you're really out there trying to do good, it should be hundreds. Do we act the same way, do the same thing in all those situations? Or are we have enough self-awareness of who we are and the value that we can bring to those situations to know when to influence and not influence, when to ask questions or not ask questions? In part of what I shared with you in just that quick example is the final ingredient of knowing. It's you got to partner with your pain and do what's hard. And that's my way of defining resilience. You have to partner with your pain. You can't run away from it. And I know I'm going to give a piece of advice right now that may sound very unpopular, Jay. But for those of you that want to reinvent yourself, do something that's hard. Why? Because if we have not reached, and if we're trying to still reach and discover and find our full potential, do something that's hard and go figure it out. Because by doing something that's hard, you're going to be forced to practice all six of these skills of discovering and knowing. We have to catch up. I have often said that if the baseline is zero, like if your starting point of wherever you're at is zero, unfortunately, most of us are at negative 70. In other words, we're down here. We think we're here, but we're down here. Why? Because we create the illusion that what we're doing down here works. We just keep going and going and going and going, and we're not getting the results that we want. Because down here is you're doing what everybody else is telling you that you should. But when you start discovering and knowing, this is when you start establishing your baseline so that you can start getting to 20, 50, 100. But we're doing a lot of catching up right now. And that's why things feel overwhelming. But I've got news for you because you are the only you in this world. You have plenty of time to catch up. The tough part about catching up is realizing what is that thing that makes you you and gives you that level of distinction to start powering yourself towards reinvention. But by the time you're done with no, you're ready to pursue. Now you're ready to pursue. And this is skill number 3. You rev up your engines of your ambitions. And you start practicing these ingredients that start with following your curiosity to seek out precise answers to your questions that you've had for years. You have to get those answers. You have to go figure that out. And while someone may give you a perspective, and there's nothing wrong with that, you have to start discovering your own truths about the things that matter to you, that you believe will add value to others. And once you do that, you start building your confidence. Your self-confidence starts to increase and you start performing at high peak performance levels because now you have it in you with what you've discovered and what you know. And as you pursue, you start maintaining an all-encompassing will to act. In other words, you're unafraid to be bold. In fact, you want to get down to work and you build a work ethic that is like no others. But when you're stuck, it's hard to find that work ethic. So those are the first 3 skills about expanding yourself, Jay. How'd that land with you? I want
So
to hear
you
what you got out of it and how I can further, add some value here to the discussion.
you think there's an inverse relationship with thinking, so you said 0 and negative 70. the -70 example, I think I know. So it's inverse. I'm back. And then you're saying, no, discover that you don't before you know is you're at zero. So like that's what I think, well, obviously you're on to something, but like that's okay. So the order matters because if I think I know, I've stopped even the process of beginning to learn, which is to unlearn and then. So that's where I love the algebraic example there.
You just gave me chills, Jay. And what did we just learn from Jay? Okay, let's talk a little bit about you here. And notice he didn't have to say a whole lot to know the value that he just brought to this discussion. And what did he say? Don't cut corners. Don't cut corners. In fact, no one has the right to cut any corners before they've gone end to end with any journey. Because if someone says, hey, man, you can cut this corner, you don't have to start here, that's based on their journey, not yours. And again, it's not that people's advice can't be helpful. Of course it is. But remember, it's hard to know if advice works
Mm,
unless you are grounded with a very solidified foundation of knowing who you are. And that's why these first three skills are critical because it's
mm,
not just about discovering more of who you are and creating an environment of this all compass learning mindset. And then when you start pursuing, you're actually putting all that insight of who you are to the test. But notice that I haven't even started to bring other people into the fold yet. And this goes back to your very, very insightful question, my friend. Because let me ask you this, Jay. And I know this is maybe a little bit tough of a question, but or unfair question, not for you, but just in general. Do we start asking people to support us if we don't know the value we bring yet? It's a tough question.
maybe to, I'm just, uh, maybe we think we do, but what we might need just affirmation or something to get, I don't, to get the, to borrow some type of bias. Like, when people ask you for feedback, but they really want, maybe their body needs affirmation.
And that's why this discovery, knowing, and pursuing part is when you're expanding yourself because you're putting every part of your soul to the test. And look, I've been an entrepreneur for years and I've reinvented myself enough to write this book. And by the way, just so everybody knows, this is not just based upon what Glenn thinks. I commissioned some psychologists,
Wow.
neuroscientists. I mean, I went out there because I needed to know that there was some scientific proof in the things that I was sharing. And boy, I had a lot of great people to support me with this. But it's amazing how one of the biggest learnings I took from a lot of this research is just how much we don't do to know what's in my best interest to be in service of others. It's like, it's almost as if we expect people to support us. We expect people to help us. I mean, this goes back to you have to earn the ability to create opportunity. You have to earn that right. You just can't go out and get it. And by the way, I get that there's a lot of groups people buy for all these things, pay to be in these groups. I'm not against those groups, but don't make an investment in something that will further confuse you if you don't go in knowing who you are.
Hmm.
Because in the end, go ahead, Jay, go, go,
Oh, well,
go.
I have a question about, earlier, so you mentioned something about those with influence and gravitating towards that, and then having a real some type, yeah, reassessment of environment and moving more so towards le divergent thinking,
Hmm.
and maybe not necessarily top of the hierarchy of influence. So my question is, do you think that those with influence uh, yeah, those in positions of influence are perceived as influential can stagnate analogous to organizations like Blockbuster stagnated in its inability to innovate and reimagine its. I'm using an example. I don't know what
Yeah.
happened
No,
there.
it's a good example.
Like part of the attraction to, because you mentioned something earlier that those with influence may not necessarily, how did you word it?
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, those that have influence may not be the ones that can give you the guidance on where you want to go. I
Because,
mean,
okay, so in the train of thought of your thesis, a similar phenomenon that happens with organizations happens to human beings, regardless of where they fall in the dominance hierarchy, and especially those that we could, idolize the concept of who we believe that they are or what they know. They may not have continued to learn, or you would put it, unlearn, relearn. There's this Chomsky quote that comes to mind that I can't remember it, but if you're still talking about your same dissertation from if 50 years into your professorship, you're still teaching your same dissertation. I'm really paraphrasing, but like there's something afoot. So I just
well,
wanted your opinion on that, on this influencer organization. So, because if I go with your other book, Age of Personalization, in this new entrepreneurial world, human beings, are almost like the blockbuster. I mean, look at the Elons and the things that people worship, like these avatars. So yeah, I mean that would be my question, or if you can elaborate on that. Do people at the top, can they stagnate analogous to the blockbusters and the organizations? And that's what you're getting at here.
let me just make this really simple. And I love your question, Jay. Um, Take a moment to go online and research. This is all public data. Research the top 100 companies or the top 100 brands in the world. And you'll see 20 years ago, the list was pretty consistent every year. Not anymore. Not anymore. Why? Because of what Jay's talking about. I mean, staying at the top is hard because what's happened? Again, there's many things that have happened, but if I can, in the scope of what we're talking about, it always used to be about the customer. It still is.
Yeah.
But what's changed is that the customer doesn't want to be defined by brands anymore. They want to help define the brand. I mean, okay, Glenn, what's an example? We know about the beer industry. Miller Lite, Coors, Budweiser. Man, those are the top three all the time. Well, not anymore. The IPA market. In fact, ready for this? A very dear friend of mine who's a Wall Street analyst spoke at a beer industry conference. I'm kind of going off track here, but it's all within the same
I mean,
angle.
did you hear what I just did? I mean, I'll give
No. I'm gonna
you're
connect
on
something.
brand here, buddy. Yeah.
You're gonna see you're gonna like this story. And he went to this and he spoke at this beer industry conference. He goes, "Ladies and gentlemen, you are no longer part of the beer industry." And this room full of beer industry executives are like, "What in the heck are you talking about?" He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, you are all in the mood management business. You're
Wow.
not just competing amongst each other anymore. Now you're competing against every small business, every app, any product or service that is in the business of creating a positive mood for people." Then, after that was all over, of course, he's a Wall Street analyst, so he had to go have one-on-one meetings or meetings with each of these large beer industry giants. And he had one question for them. And this goes back to leadership in the age of personalization. He said, "Do you have the right people to lead in the mood management business?" I hope I don't have to explain this one. But this is an example of when we don't reinvent, we actually forget what industry we're in. And this goes back to say that much
Wow.
like an individual, organizations need to find opportunity and reinvention. In fact, take note of this, Jay. Data came out in August of 2024 from PwC, and that's what it's called, Finding Opportunity and Reinvention. 34% of CEOs believe that their competitors will be out of business between 1 and 3 years.
Yeah.
And here's the more concerning part. Remember, we talked about the how? Only
Yeah.
41% of executives can't come to consensus with how to change the business model.
Holy moly.
So, but anyway, it's a heck of a data set
But
PwC provided, and
the
anybody
answer
can
to that
down
is
it.
likely on the other side of your book, though. Your
This
how.
is this is
That's
the this is
yeah.
and look, and again, I'm not trying to make this about me. It's really
No,
about
I made it about you because I
no, I
read that.
know. I
No,
do
'cause
so
when you
good,
said
Jay.
34%, well, this I know, our buddy, he's been said 6 years ago. He's like, you need to get to know Glenn. So here we are. So shame on me for taking so long. But 34%, when you said 34%, 1 to 3 years, they'll be out of business. But
No,
like
no, their
that,
competitors will be out
yeah,
of
I
it.
know. Well, that's the psychology of that isn't that funny that if they think that, are they, is there a possibility that they're part of their brain that really knows that they're not doing what they need to do
This is
is
why
projecting that? Like,
yeah, well, Jay, the
if
one
I have
of
the gall to say that, I better, oh, my watch is falling off. I better like know what I'm doing. I want your thoughts on that.
Jay, the number one executive position that has the most turnover today are CEOs.
Wow, that's an opportunity.
Well, it is. But what's the challenge of being a CEO? If you can't come in 1 year, maximum two, and turn it around, you're done. Look at what's
Wow.
happened in professional sports, right? If that head coach doesn't deliver, you're gone, gone, gone. We're in an age of immediate results. But why is that fair and unfair? It's fair because you can try to be whatever you want, but it's unfair because we're making the assumptions that we actually have the right people on our teams to get us to where we want to go. In fact, I've always said in this whole journey of change, in reinvention, before I get to the last three, do we have time for the last three skills?
If that It's up to I can go longer, yeah.
No, no, no. Well, I want to respect your show because I know people love it. But people always, I've always been asking this question, and I've kind of talked about it already, but I'll say it in a different
Would you
way.
be willing to do a part two?
Absolutely. No
Well,
problem. I'll do a
then
part two.
Gene Driver says we can do an open loop, like, hey,
Perfect. Yeah,
take
perfect.
a look at
Perfect.
part two for the next two prince.
Next three think done.
Yeah,
Done.
yeah.
But
All
the
right.
whole point is that where do you start with the environment, the individual, or both? In other words, what is your environment? It's the environment of people you associate with. What are you doing for you as an individual? This is where we're talking about making reinvention your superpower so you don't get stuck in that quicksand. You can revive your future. But where does this all go with the question that you said about really the individual and how's this align with the organization? Is that in organizations, they should be aligning their business growth strategies with their employees' capacities. But most of them don't because they don't know who they are. What they know are the performance reports that give them some indication about what their people are capable of, but they're in the end making an assumption that those people are ready to help execute that growth that they're looking for.
Mm.
Which means what? If you're a corporate person, entrepreneur, you have to spend more time on investing in yourself to make sure that you are in constant reinvention mode so that circumstances don't force your hand. You know how many times I've been told, oh my God, Glenn, I can't believe I was furloughed. What, do you think that this was a budget issue? Think again. You weren't adding enough value. No, but I was, Glenn. I did all these things. Let me ask you
Mm.
this for whomever's listening. When's the last time you asked yourself if your skills are transferable? Because when you get furloughed, it's very clear that you've been defined by the role. They don't need the role, so you're done. Now, if you're defining the role, that means you have the opportunity to define or transfer your skills and capacities in other roles. In other words, you weren't doing enough to get people to know what your value was. The job placed the value on you.
Mm.
How are we doing here, Jay?
Better than most, I think.
Well, you know
I'd
what?
like to ask you if you could, where can people follow you on Instagram?
Glenn
Yeah.
Llopis, GlennLLOPIS.
And the book is on Amazon. It's reinventing yourself with
Make,
a superpower.
make,
Is
make
yeah.
reinvention your superpower. I got some exciting news about this, Jay. It's coming out next week. Um, and then in January, it's already ready to go, but we're going to launch in January. I'm doing it in Spanish
Well, that's
because,
amazing. And was it what so was it your dad and your uncle that was Los? So I was researching, but to prepare Llopis, that brought this for maybe next time we could talk about it, that brought rock to Spain. Yeah, there was like a band, correct?
oh my gosh.
I saw it behind one of your YouTube videos. There was an interesting poster. So I looked it up and I found there was like these great songs. Was that your father and his and your uncle, or was that some other? Because it was a similar.
You touched my heart there, my friend. I lost my dad 11 years ago.
Oh man!
He made it to 97 years old.
Wow,
Um,
that's amazing.
and I'll tell you, Jay, it's because of my dad that I do what I do for a living. And why do I say that? Because my dad helped me understand a lot of these things when I was a kid. And but yeah, just the quick story because I think it's
Please.
watch the tie-in here to all this, Jay. And don't forget that story I mentioned around, hey, is she adding any value to your life? Because you'll see where this all kind of comes from. So my dad, not to go into the whole thing, but he went to school here in the United States, went back to Cuba, and he wanted to. He had this passion for music. Him and his uncle. That's who looks just like him, right?
Wow.
And with two of their cousins, they started this quartet called Los Llopis. But what my dad did is he was the first to create crossover music. Was the first to integrate American rock and roll into the rhythms and sounds of Cuban music.
Wow.
And this was at a time before the revolution where they actually, a lot of people don't know this, where Cuba was not allowed to play American rock and roll. No Elvis Presley, none of that. Um, and my dad created a gateway for it by integrating it into uh, the rhythms and sounds of Cuban music. Um, I miss him. I mean, basically, my dad did what? He commercialized diversity of thought. See how it all ties back?
Well,
He,
and he's still with us. I mean,
oh,
clearly you've honored him with this show, man. God bless you for that, because I mean, that what else could you ask for from a legacy standpoint? So I'm sure there's many listeners right now that are, in waking up a little bit, relearning, or
oh well,
yeah,
he
your
taught me how to
testimony.
do all that stuff. And it's interesting if I
Uh,
may give my dad a quick plug. And by the way,
please.
let me make sure I make this very, very clear. I grew up lower middle class. My parents had to start over. In fact, here's a fun fact. My dad was one of the three chemists who formulated Miller Lite. Could imagine how much fun my high school years were.
Holy
But
cow.
but anyway, I share all this with you
Wow.
because um, uh, when you have the fortune that I did to be raised in a family that was so small with so much love, trust me, um, I learned that I had a responsibility to uphold my father's legacy. But what's the end of the story here? Maybe we could wrap it up now if you want. But here it
Yes,
comes.
sir.
Is it about 2 years before my dad passed? Um, I was fortunate enough to get a call from the University of Madrid in Spain. And when my dad the way this worked, my dad was in Argentina traveling with his quartet. My mom was with him. In fact, my brother was born in Argentina. But he got a telegram from his mother that said, revolution has started. He can't come back. So what did my dad have to do? He had to, back then in every country, Jay, every country had its own record label. Now all those record labels are owned by Warner Brothers, Warner Records. But what's the point? He sold all of his recording contracts in exchange for cash just to keep going
Whoa.
because it wasn't just him and his wife and his son, but it was the quartet. And I get this call 2 years before my dad passes. And the only reason someone made that connection is because they saw my dad on my website.
Mm.
And that's a whole other story about how history gets lost when you lose touch of people and the real story. But so I get this call and they said, look, we want to talk to your dad. I said, my dad's on a condition. I'd love to send a message to him. Said, we know that your dad sold his recording contracts to a record label here in Spain for $16,000. Let your dad know. And this was in 2013. No, no, sorry. 2000 and yeah, 2000. No, no, back then it was like 2011. They said, let your dad know that since that time, and that was 1961, his records have sold in Spain alone $12.5 million.
Wow.
And I shared that with my dad, and he said this to me. He said, son, $16,000 was a hell of a lot of money back then. And it let me buy food, live a good life until I finally found myself back to the United States after I, closed that loop on my musical career.
Mm.
He goes, but son, what gives me joy about $12.5 million is that my music still matters and
Wow.
it's giving people joy. I share this with you. Why? Because I hope people understand the things that really matter in life. And it's what's going to happen to your legacy when it's all over in your life. But what he taught me is this, is that what I do today, I do this for one reason. I know why I'm here. It's to help create future legacies. That's why I want to support you, Jay. I want to help you. And that's why I'm here. Now I do more to help you. But what's the point? I realized that when Warner Brothers bought those record rights, they actually didn't buy all the rights. And I'm not going to fight for it. That's not what this is about. But this is why after I published my first two books, I said, I'm going to publish them myself because no one is going to take that away from me.
Mm.
Because I'm not going to let happen what happened to my daughter. I mean, happened for my daughter, who's only 9 years old now. And I'm going to make sure that I give her a library so that she not only knows who her grandfather was, but she knows who her dad is. Because the reality is, I don't know how much longer I'm going to have and if I'm going to make it until she's 40. But she will have a gift on the other side. And I think that's what really matters in life. And that's why we all have to work to be the best that we can be. Because what's the point in being negative, hateful, complaining when you have a whole life to live that unfortunately may have been defined by someone else, but you have the opportunity to turn that around right
Mm.
now from someone like me and others, but I just put this one together. Why? Because if I had the knowledge that I'm going to do what I say in skill six, share what you know, man. Share what you know. You know how much I've learned of how people don't want to share because they're holding on to some secret. What's secret? What is secret? You are contributing to the weakening of humanity every time you don't want to share something. I mean, what is it that you can't find out about on the internet? Yeah, who you are. That's what you can't find out. And yet we have platforms that give you enough reason to know who you're not. So I share this because in the end, when it's all said and done, what are you going to be proud of? The number of views you have, the number of clicks you have, or the real value that you've contributed because you finally placed a bet on yourself for the betterment of others. My dad did that, and that's what I'm here to do. And I'm glad and I'm very appreciative, Jay, that you've allowed me to, contribute a little something today that will, number one, help people understand the power of your vision and what matters to you for the betterment of others. But also so that people know that there's people like you and I who really care and want to do something good with what we have.
Glenn, I'm honored. And I challenge anyone listening to this. First of all, if you want to have a good time, go on YouTube and listen to some of those rock songs. It's great music. Pick up this new book. When's it launch? Where can they get it? What day is it launch? Because this is going out before that. So
Yeah, it's going, it's going, it'll come out on, well, here's the details. The 12th of November, boom, they can get it in ebook form. The following week, it's coming out in hardcover.
awesome. And they could Audible too, coming soon, or
Audible coming soon. But
big,
right
because
now,
I'm
this is what we
huge on
got.
Audible. Yeah, I love
Okay, yeah,
Audible.
no, that's coming soon. That's coming soon.
Awesome. Glenn, I can't wait till next time. Thank you for coming on the show. Thank you all for listening. Follow Glenn on Instagram. You can find everything from there. Get this new book, Mastering Reinvention
Make
Superpower.
reinvention your
Sorry, I
superpower.
get
It's all
jumbled.
good. Make
Say it. Wait, say
reinvention
it.
your superpower.
Say it again.
Sure. It's called Make Reinvention Your Superpower. 6 skills to escape career quicksand and revive your future.
We will see you all next time in the Culture Matters podcast. Thanks so much, my friend.